The respiratory system is a series of organs responsible for taking on oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide. The primary organs of the respiratory system are lungs, which carry out this exchange of gases. Red blood cells collect the oxygen from the lungs and carry it to the parts of the body where it is needed. Red blood cells also collect carbon dioxide and transport it back to the lungs where it leaves the body through exhalation. The frontal sinus are paired sinuses located above the eyes in the frontal bone in the forehead area. They are cavities filled with air and lined with mucous membranes that are believed to warm, moisten, and filter inspired air. The nasal cocci are curved shelves of bone that project out of the lateral walls on the nasal cavity. They create pathways for the air to follow. They function to increase the surface area of the nasal cavity. They also slow down the air so it can be humidified into the nasal cavity. The nose is the preferred entrance for outside air into the respiratory system. Hairs that line the nose's wall are part of the air cleaning system. The larynx is part of the airway below the pharynx that holds the vocal cords. The trachea is the passage leading from the throat to the lungs that allows the passage of air. The bronchus are extensions of the trachea that shuttle air to and from the lungs.
Bronchioles are smaller passageways for airflow that branch off the bronchus. These passageways are lined with cilia, which move mucus. The left lung is divided into two lobes but functions similar to the right lung by bringing oxygen into the body and expelling carbon dioxide. The diaphragm is the strong wall of muscle that separates your chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. By moving downward, it creates suction in the chest, drawing in air and expanding the lungs. The opposite occurs with exhalation, where the diaphragm relaxes upward and allows the lungs to deflate. The right lung is divided into three lobes, which function to take in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. The alveoli are tiny air sacs within lungs that allow oxygen and carbon dioxide to move between the lungs and the bloodstream.
The pharynx is the part of the airway where air joins together. The nasal cavity is a hollow space within the nose and the skull that is lined with hairs and a mucous membrane. The function of the nasal cavity is to warm, moisturize, and filter air entering the body. The sphenoid sinuses are paired sinuses located in the sphenoid bone in the area behind the nose and the eyes. They are cavities filled with air and lined with mucous membranes that function to warm, moisten, and filter inspired air.
There are many morphological and physiological transformations, such as the change from anaerobic life to aerobic life, the change from an open to a closed circulatory system, the change from water to land to increase the use of lungs and the formation of lungs themselves. The air-breathing organ in fish, along with the gill respiration, appeared in fish about 400 million years ago and consisted of a single primitive lung ventilated by a buccal pump. However, now fish have evolved to do respiration through their lungs, although some utilize a special organ to take advantage of oxygen through the air. 400 million years ago, mammals developed primitive lungs which turned into bronchioalveolar lungs. Mammalian lungs are located in two cavities on either side of the heart and contain the primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and bronchioles. Reptiles have developed a partitioned lung with one or several cavities that serve as a gas exchanger but also as an O2 reserve. Reptiles don't have a diaphragm to breathe in and out of, like humans do, so they breathe either moving their throat or their ribs. Birds developed an air-breathing organ called the tubular structure, but it is ventilated by unidirectional airflow. Such a breathing system allows for high rates of oxygen consumption, which is more efficient for the bird.
There are many ways the respiratory system helps to maintain homeostasis in the body. The supply of oxygen in the bloodstream is an important part of maintaining homeostasis, as oxygen is needed to break down sugars and use them for energy to fuel the body. The respiratory system monitors the homeostatic gas exchange by inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide needs to be monitored to make sure that too much of this waste product does not build up. The amount of carbon dioxide present determines the pH, and cells have a pH range in which they are best able to function. The respiratory system also regulates body's water content and internal temperature by releasing warm moisture-filled air when exhaling. Additionally, the movement of the lungs helps with optimal blood circulation and protects the body from the numerous contaminants and microbes that enter the body as we inhale, maintaining homeostasis. The structure and organization of the respiratory system allows for maximum diffusion of O2 and CO2. In humans, lungs are internal cavities for respiratory gas exchange with air. They are elastic and can be inflated or deflated quickly. Human lungs have about 300 alveoli, which are thin-walled air sacs. Although each alveolus is very small, their combined surface area for diffusion of respiratory gases is about 70 square meters. Increased surface area allows for quicker diffusion. Alveoli and capillaries are 1 cell thick. This distance is very short, which maximizes diffusion. Blood flow is very close to our cells. Additionally, humans have the advantage of using air instead of water. Oxygen gas diffuses 8,000 times faster in air than it does in water. Water is so much harder to move and ventilate than air. An animal has to work harder to move water than air. It requires more energy to do so because water is 800 times denser than air and about 50 times more viscous. The maximum O2 content in water is less than 10 milliliters of O2 per liter of water, while the O2 content of air is about 200 milliliters of O2 per liter of air.
Insects perform cellular respiration through gated openings called spiracles in the sides of the abdomen. The spiracles open to allow gas exchange and then close to decrease water loss. They open into tubes called tracheae that branch into even finer tubes called tracheoles, which end in tiny air capillaries that are the actual gas exchange surfaces. In these surfaces, oxygen is taken from the air into the trachea. At the same time, carbon dioxide enters the trachea so that it can be expelled from the body. Fish use gills for gas exchange. They have gill arcs that are placed between the mouth cavity and the orbicular flaps behind their eyes on the sides of the fish. Water containing dissolved oxygen enters the fish's mouth and moves through the gills. As water moves through the gill filaments, blood inside the capillaries pick up the dissolved oxygen. Because of the countercurrent exchange, there is a higher chance for oxygen absorption. At the end of the process, dissolved CO2 leaves the fish's system. Birds use the process of unidirectional airflow through the lungs. Birds inhale the air, which travels through the trachea and fills the posterior air sacs, which receive inhaled air. During exhalation, air in the posterior air sacs enters the lungs and undergoes gas exchange. The used air in the lungs is displaced by new air and flows out of the body through the trachea. However, in the next breath, that air goes through the anterior air sacs and then leaves through the trachea. In humans, oxygen comes into the body through the lungs. In the lungs, the oxygen is moved into the bloodstream and then carried through the body. Red blood cells collect the carbon dioxide and transport it back to the lungs, where it leaves the body as humans exhale.